Every female wants to be loved by a male. Every woman wants to love and be loved by males in her life. Do you think every woman wants the love of a man?
The only emotion that men are sort of allowed to express really is anger.
So if I say to you, Tyler, let's just open up to me. What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Pause.
So she says, when I was in my 20s, I would go to couples therapy and my partner of more than 10 years would explain how I asked him to talk about his feelings. And when he did, I would freak out.
If schools out there are really concerned that 15 years old, 14-year-olds are going to YouTube and finding the answer to their problems around masculinity through Andrew Tate and others, I think we're still in a lot of trouble.
Welcome to The Power of Pages, where we review books that ignite your mind,
elevate your life,
and drive your ambition. And this episode, we are reviewing The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. And as you can see, we've got a lovely guest here, Nelio, who actually chose this book and is the reason that we read this book. So yeah, Nelio is on Instagram as well, that Capoeira guy. Give him a follow, give him an ad, like and join, all of them good stuff. But Nelio, thank you for coming. And firstly, why did you recommend this book for us? Because,
So thank you for having me, both of you. I guess this was one of the most impactful books that I've read in a while. Impactful, hard read. But I find that it's useful to me as an adult, as a man, to read that book. And close male friends of mine, I recommended the book.
Yeah, okay. And you said impactful, in what way?
In more ways than I can begin to describe, to be honest. A more formal introduction to the idea of patriarchy.
Yes.
How I may have been impacted by being part of a patriarchal system myself. How some of my own behaviors, I was brought up with my nan and a lot of my aunts around me. So I like to think that I'm in touch with women, or I can understand women and stuff like that. But that's not always the case. There are deeper layers. And this specific book has helped me understand that those deeper layers of understanding women and understanding myself as a man in context with women within a patriarchal system.
Yeah.
What was was it the idea about finding out about patriarchy that sort of drew you to it, or was there something that drew you to it?
I went to visit a friend. She was getting rid of loads of books, and one of the books that she was getting rid of was this one.
Yes.
And I've kind of been reading a lot of books that are designed to accelerate my personal growth in regards to my career, what I'm doing for a living.
Yep.
And I'm a bit tired of those books, so it felt like it was something that I wanted to come close to.
Yeah.
Did you have an understanding? Because I had patriarchy, especially now with online and depending on who you listen to and the manosphere and all this kind of stuff. Patriarchy is a word that's banded around a lot, and I kind of thought I had an understanding of the word, what it is, but I didn't actually know the definition or have a definition for it. A strong one anyway. Did you understand? What was your definition or your understanding of patriarchy before you read the book?
So I didn't have a deeper understanding, and I guess my mind would create an association with toxic masculinity. And I would immediately say I'm not that guy, so therefore this doesn't apply to me.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. You're not that toxic guy, so you're not part of the patriarchy, but we all are, and we've all, I guess, benefited from it. And I just want to touch on in the book, because it actually gives a definition of understanding patriarchy.
Yeah, that was useful.
She says, patriarchy is a social, political, and economic system where men hold primary power, dominating roles in political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. And that's, the definition.
That's one of, she put a few.
Yeah.
But that was one. No, similar. They all roll around the same thing. Do you know what I mean? So they are consistent in the way she defines it or the way it's defined, but there wasn't a specific definition of this is patriarchy, but it's described and defined in different ways across different times through the book. Yeah. But it's about power and control. I think the thing because I think the patriarchy, when I've watched certain debates online before, men and women, and the patriarchal society is sort of described as something that benefits men that men benefit from. But reading this book, I feel like men are also a victim. I think women are definitely a victim of it, but men are also a victim of it. Which it paints quite a chilling. I don't actually see the world this way. Like, it doesn't really resonate with how I see the world, but I can definitely relate, because some of the things I'm like, yeah, I definitely relate to that. But it really paints like a really bleak picture for if we're talking about men, specifically for men, and then also for women. And when you talk about, which we'll get into, like things like the violence, control, control, and not being felt love, not being able to show love, withholding your all these sort of things. Is like, wow, this is like a prison that you're kind of kept inside. This society or this system is quite like prison like.
Yeah, and I guess one of those things that we'll probably come onto is like being in touch with your emotions and thinking that violence is the answer, and we'll touch on some of those things. But I guess I wanted to start in order by talking about the chapter Wanted Men Who Love. So Bell Hooks has got the chapter Wanted Men Who Love, and she made a statement. I want to ask you if you agree or disagree, and the viewers if you agree or disagree. And what she says is, every female wants to be loved by a male. Every woman wants to love and be loved by males in her life. Whether gay or straight, bisexual or celibate, she wants to feel the love of a father, a grandfather, uncle, brother, or male friend. And I want to say, what's your opinion on that? Do you think every woman wants the love of a man? And I guess the reason I asked that, because I thought about this and I flipped it in reverse, and I thought, does every man want the love of a woman? And for myself, from a deeper thought process, I think that is true. I think I do want the love from a woman, whether it's my mum, my nan, my gran, my sister, my partner. I think men are chasing and appreciate the love of a woman. I mean, we reviewed Mike Tyson's book, and a big theme of that book is Mike Tyson wanting a mother and wanting to be loved and wanting that female figure. So when I saw this question, every female wants to be loved by a male, I thought, I can see how that might be true. So I guess,
Nelio, you can answer first.
Yeah, I think where that statement is useful is that it allows me and you to drop our guard when we're starting to read this book. Because if we think about feminism as an attack on masculinity, that statement already disarms you a little bit. So if we accept that statement as a valid statement, then we can start engaging with the content of this book. But if we start perceiving women as, they're the ones who are trying to attack us or attack our masculinity.
The enemy.
So I think part of the work of this book is, can we disarm how we perceive feminism or aggressive versions of feminism so we can engage with patriarchy, masculinity, and what does that mean from a female optic?
I think as well, just to touch on the patriarchy, we saw that as like, toxic masculinity. And I think a lot of people perceive feminism at the other spectrum as being toxic, but that's not what feminism is,
Correct.
And like you said, that disarms us to be more open-minded to continue reading.
Yeah. Because I find it that at different occasions that I've tried to talk with male friends of mine about the book, there was a defensive stance. There was a very initial defensive stance.
Where'd that come from, do you think?
Our perception of feminism as a source of attacks.
Do you think it's because it was written by a woman, the book, or?
It's because of how feminism has been sold to women.
Yeah.
So I think the author later down, she attacks versions of feminism that try to discard or reject masculinity. So I think if I perceive a feminine movement or feminist movement as attacking me wanting to be masculine and me needing to be masculine, again, and in masculine there are needs of control, there are needs of power. These are, how we can sit in the world as men. So I was very intrigued by how initially, as I was starting conversations with close male friends, there was just this very defensive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did, because we spoke. You were kind of speaking about the book with me, and then that's when I said, "Oh, we can read it on the pod." But in regards to, I mean, I'm always with general statements. I'm always sort of like, I always resist general statements and like everyone wants it this, like, because I don't believe that to be true.
Yeah.
For myself, when I think of that basic human need, I think love is one of those basic human needs, connectedness, which generally comes from the parent, if you're fortunate enough, So I think yes, but I don't think it's just, I think men are included. I think everybody. That's sort of how I think, And then when you're talking about, is it a type of love, So is it that romantic love that you have with your partner, as in male to female, or is it that love that you have to a sibling or a family member? So, or is it just, you know what I mean? So it's quite a deep one. Do I think it's true? I think, yeah, but I think people would push against it as well.
Yeah.
I think some women may say, no, I don't want or desire the love of a man. I think people would say that. So I don't think it's a true statement in that sense, because I think so that's what I think about that.
Yeah, okay. And you touched on a good point, because in this book, the author, she says a lot of her own opinion as fact.
Yeah.
She states a lot of the way she sees the world as fact, rather than, her opinion, which I didn't like. Because, like you said, every female wants to be loved by a male. I mean, does every female want to be?
People would push against it.
Yeah.
People would push against it. But yeah, I think that's because Bell Hooks is obviously, I was aware of Bell Hooks prior to reading this book, because she's quite a popular author. Which, when we did shout out to Layla and the Kensington book show. So we interviewed some people at that show, and a lot of them mentioned Bell Hooks as an author, books that she's written about romance and love and stuff like that. So when I saw the author of the book, I was like, oh, it's the same person. I think you actually pointed that out to me. So in that same chapter, one thing that I do agree with, and this is clear to see in my opinion, like, the only male emotion, because with men, our emotions, we're very guarded, and this is part of the patriarchal system and the way the world is, and this, the only emotion that men are sort of allowed to express really is anger, like which is bad. In my opinion, it's the wrong thing. It's the only thing that men feel comfortable showing in public, and they'll mask other feelings with feelings of anger, or anger. If they start to feel any other type of way, anger will be the next thing coming very quickly, and that's very dangerous for everyone involved. And that's where we get into the violence, different types of violence. But again, she said anger is the best hiding place for anybody seeking to conceal pain or anguish of spirit. And I think that's very true, and that's a problem. Working with young people, you see it's more explicit, because they've got they can't maybe mask that anger as much. It shows itself in different ways, but that is something that I think is that's one of the prisms, one of the cell, within this patriarchy. I think the fact that men are only really allowed, or allow themselves, or whatever, however you want to put it, but anger is like the only thing you can express. I was mad, I was angry, I was vexed, I was whatever word you want to use. As opposed to saying, yeah, man, I was really hurt by that, man. That really made me upset. You don't really hear people talk about it in a public forum, and there's reasons why, because it can go against. You can feel vulnerable. As men, we don't like to be vulnerable. I know I definitely don't. Not in public spaces. So you have to feel like you're in a safe space. Yeah. So
she said, actually, in the book, the first act of violence that the patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves.
Yep.
And that hit somewhat.
Yeah.
Because
do you remember when Stoicism was a big thing? So that reminded me of when Stoicism was a big thing. So sorry, carry on.
I lost my thought, but yeah.
sorry.
No, but yeah, that somewhat hit, because sometimes you might hide your emotions or suppress your emotions as a man, because you don't want to impact other people. You don't want to affect other people's emotions. So I'm specifically thinking about in female relationships, and I don't just mean with a partner. I mean with family and stuff. I know. I'll use my mum for example. If I express any emotion towards her, she will then take on that emotion as well.
Okay.
So if I say I'm sad or whatever, then she'll be sad that I'm sad. So it's better for me to just not tell her that I'm sad because then I'm not gonna make her sad.
That's interesting.
And that statement there hit home because
I think it's a big invitation for us to look at where did we learn some of these behaviors from. So when we think about anger is not always a negative emotion. It can be very useful to establish boundaries. But in the context of patriarchy, we can see anger as a emotion that is good enough to be a masculine emotion.
Yeah.
You know, so now we can express anger. But we also have to look at where have we learned that anger from. You know, so did we learn that in order to be a man, is that the only emotion that we could express that was valid enough? So what you're saying is because when we were talking about anger, I was thinking, did we learn that from our fathers? Did we learn that from our male caregivers? That it's not okay to be in touch with your emotions. It's okay to be angry. But now what you're saying is that there's other emotions that you may have learned from your mom as a caregiver, which is, or another strategic emotion, which is not to go too deep or not to share too much. So we can see how in this patriarchy model, even women can assist us having this type of masculinity that is not useful for us on the very long term. I can relate to exactly what you say, because with my mom as well, there's things that I can't share because I'm going to make her concerned. You know, but again, with my dad, I learned that you shouldn't make a big deal out of things. Do you know what I mean? So where do you stand? So you start suppressing a lot of this kind of being connected with your emotions from very, very early on.
Yeah.
I think where I sort of, because I agree with both of you, especially if we're talking about parents. But then I'm like, okay, that's our experience as men. But, you know, if I'm thinking of a female with the same situation you said, if my wife is talking to her mum, she might not want to tell her mum exactly how she's feeling because her mum might pick up that feeling and that emotion and be like, so it's the same thing you said. You know, I think I don't know if that's exclusive to males, is basically the point I'm making. But just go on.
So I think in that sense is that, let's say, for a woman, it'd be okay. So if I'm Tyler's mom and Tyler has a sister, maybe the message that I'm going to give to Tyler's sister is that it's okay for her to share that stuff with me. It's okay. I'll be thinking of it, but I expect you as a daughter of mine to express those things to me. But maybe as a male son, I expect you to be a man and get on with it. So if I see you as a man but still struggling with some emotions, I might become disadjusted as a parent.
Yeah.
If I see you as a woman who is struggling with emotions, I might think this is what you're meant to do as a woman, hormonal women, etc., etc., etc.
It's funny, it's on topic, but I had a chat with my missus, my wife, a few days ago. There's a meme. My brother sent me a meme online, and very long story short, the guy's in the car, his wife comes in, and the guy pretends he's crying. It's funny, but he's crying. His wife's like, "Oh, what's wrong?" And then he's like, "Oh, he's crying." He's like, "Oh, that guy was mean to me." And then she's like, "What's up?" Like, you know, like she was at first. She was like, she was confused because obviously you don't see men cry like that, especially for that sort of reason.
Yeah.
Again, we would go to the anger. Like, you're being mean to me, I'm gonna rise up. Do you know what I mean? That's what you do as a man, right?
Yeah.
So it was quite funny and whatever. It's banter. So I said to my missus, I said, "Oh, if that happened, me and you, like, what would you do? Like, if I was genuinely crying because someone was mean to me," and she was like, I would try. The answer was, I just tried to understand what it is that he did that made you cry like that. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And she was like, I said, "Wow." I said, "Oh, if that," and that's fine. Like, that's. And I said, "Oh, if it was you crying, my first thing would be to comfort you. That's the first thing I would try and do. I'll just try and hug you and be like, I don't even care. Like, I want to make you okay first." And I think that's the difference, because men, we expect, and that's the society's patriarchy and whatnot. And I think most men, if they see a woman in distress, they want to comfort first and then and protect in that sort of way. Like, it's all right. It's okay. It's going to be all right. But that's sort of what we do as men.
Yeah. As
women, to see a man, because men don't, I think it's confusing and it discombobulates you to see a man like crying or, over something that's so subtle. But, maybe if he's super sensitive, like, who's going to cry over that? It's banter. But you get the point I'm making. It's like, it's it's just funny, like our responses, and this is part of the system that we're talking about, isn't it? Society, but you know.
What's up, Power of Pagers? If you've made it this far into the episode, big up yourself. And as a loyal Power of Pager, we value you. That's why we've created our mailing list to keep you updated on what we're reading, get your input and feedback on books that we should read, and let you know about any behind the scenes events that we may run or be a part of. If you'd like to be an official part of the Power of Pages community, head to the link in the description box and join our free mailing list. You don't want to miss out. But for now, back to the book review, and thanks for being a Power of Pager. She says she has an example from herself in her 20s. So she says, when I was in my 20s, I would go to couples therapy, and my partner of more than 10 years would explain how I asked him to talk about his feelings. And when he did, I would freak out. He was right. It was hard for me to face that I did not want my image of the strong man truly challenged by learning of his weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And it was like, she says she wants him to open up.
Yeah.
But when he does open up, it's actually now, you know, giving her the ick, as what they say, as the young kids say.
It's funny because these are reinforced by, like, what I did like on this is she used a lot of films as references, but that even reminded me of, is it Friends maybe? I think Chandler goes counselling with Monica. And then again, he gets in tune with his feminine side, and then everything happens. He starts crying. I'm so happy. I'm so, and it's like eventually it's like, oh, he's crying again. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's so, and it's funny because it's a male.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a female in that same situation, it's not a joke anymore. It's not funny anymore. But yeah, man, look.
Do you guys remember this thing that was going on last year that you'd call one of your male friends in the evening and wish him good night?
Yes,
and how hard that was for someone to call you and say, how you doing? Just want to wish you good night.
But, I don't know, it's weird, man. I mean, I get it, but I'm trying to see, all right, patriarchy, I think is something that is negative for men and women, children, I think for everyone. But I don't conflate patriarchy and masculinity in the same breath.
But this is the work that the author does, in which she says that feminism needs masculinity.
Yes.
And masculinity itself is not a bad thing.
Okay.
Masculinity within a system is what can be tricky. You know, or how the system presents this. And then again, if we go slightly deeper, we're talking about systems that use white supremacy or patriarchy as weapons, you know. And I think one of the lenses that I use to help me understand a lot of the concept was, let's say, the ideas of privilege or racial privilege. Let's say if I'm Caucasian, I'm a white person, and I just can't relate with the struggle of someone who is of color. I just can't relate. Because I've got a genuine blind spot there. I've never experienced hardship. So I would think that black men have no reason to be uneducated. They have got no reason to have different baby moms and different children. But I don't look at what has happened in society that has led men, or black men specifically, or men of color specifically, to behave in these ways. So I think that there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
It brings up. Sorry, go on to you.
No, go on.
I was going to say, there's so much in the book that brings up a lot of topics for discussion. And what I did like, what the author did is she tied a lot of it into like popular culture as well. I think there's even a topic on popular culture. And obviously, so she referenced like four films or 4 different TV shows that everyone's, you know, The Incredible Hulk, American Beauty, Sex and the City, and Harry Potter, funny enough. And I was like, wow, when the way she described it, I said, okay, I can definitely see the Harry Potter one. I could definitely. I think with the one that kind of hit the most was the American Beauty. If you've seen the film, I'm not going to go into it too tough, but it's a good film, and I like the film. And she said, films like American Beauty send a message to male audiences that there is no hope for depressed men who are willing to change. There is no place for them in the patriarchal culture. And I was like, when you deep it, it's, you know, the story is the man changes his life. He's depressed. He realizes he's kind of just living out his life in like nothing's really doing. So he starts training. You know, he starts taking himself a bit serious and whatnot. He starts taking risks and stuff like that, and then he gets killed at the end. So it's like, what? You know what I mean? So when you look at it like that, it's like what is the message that you're sending here? Do you see what I mean? And not to say whether that was their intention, but it's true. You've got a man, mid-40s, midlife crisis, XYZ, and then the story is he gets killed at the end. Like, that's
a very big subliminal message, right?
Do you think that's intentional?
Yes,
Do
no
you
doubt.
think that's intentional?
I haven't seen the film.
Haven't
so
you?
nah,
Oh man,
but-
listen, you need to see
But
that film.
there's a huge amount of stereotypes of what does it mean to be a man, right? So either the Incredible Hulk or, but
Yeah,
So
what
one,
she touches on, yeah.
one that come to my mind that is not one that she refers. Do you guys remember Demi Moore when she did G.I. Jane?
I've never seen it.
So Demi Moore,
Yeah, I remember she
wanted
cut
to
her
join
hair.
the
Yeah,
army.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's all about the army's acceptance of females. Throughout the movie, she just had to become incredibly masculine. So the only way she'd be accepted in the army as a member of the army that can go, abroad and fight to defend their nation was through being very, very, very masculine. And then some other movie that came into my mind was Tyler Perry, 688.
I haven't seen it.
So it's this movie that talks about war, but it talks about how women were responsible by taking over correspondence. So there was a failure of the post office services in making sure that men that were at war were communicating with their wives, with their families through delivering this correspondence, and there was a failure the other way around. So the movie talks about a whole battalion of women of color who decided to fix this. So
I've heard about this.
after this huge task of organizing names and addresses, they were able to facilitate communication between men and women during war. But it made me think how that story about war was never told. Maybe because we're talking about women, and maybe we're talking about women of color. And then it made me think about something else. So the statement that you mentioned, Tyler, that she made in the beginning, that we are told not to get in touch with our emotions. If I'm trying to create the perfect soldier, if I'm trying to create someone that is meant to go to war, follow instructions, and just performing a task for me, do I want them to be in touch with their emotions?
No,
Do I
because then
want
you
them to
develop
feel-
empathy. Because no, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Why would it would go against what you need?
Because I just need you to be able to
Fulfill
complete
the
the task
task,
for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I just need you to feel like that's what's going to give you purpose. Being a man, going to fight for your country, defending your national ideas. So you can see how in that specific movie, and then Tyler Perry is a black producer-director who's recently been able to create his own studios not too far from Hollywood. So you can imagine how we've had to start telling our own stories because some of these stories were not being told.
Yeah.
And we have to wonder why are some of these stories not being told.
No, she ties in. I mean, racial identity is definitely very much tied in within this book. So I had to Google because I even though I knew her name, I didn't know anything
She's
else
passed
about
away
her.
now.
Really?
Yeah.
When?
I can't remember. 2020, 2021.
I asked you that. You knew her, innit? Like,
Oh yeah.
I was like, when? Like, so I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I think 2021 around that time.
Okay, well,
So,
rest in peace.
yeah.
Rest in peace. But yeah, so I Googled to see whether, to see what, I see she's obviously a black lady. And it kind of made, because feminism, I don't know if you ever heard this, but feminism, a lot of black women say that, what I've seen of a lot of vocal black women online actually say a feminist movement is like a white woman's movement. Have you heard a middle class white woman? That's sort of there's definitely a thinking of that out there. And then reading what she said kind of tied in a little bit. She didn't talk about it much, but there's I've heard that before. I don't know that much about feminism besides what the general person would know, but I know there's definitely a school of thought out there that it's not for black women. Because again, if you look at how black women are viewed in society, you can kind of marry that up because they're not. So that was this kind of tied in with that, because she's not a feminist, but she doesn't sound like a feminist in this, because of her views are like you said, feminism sort of.
But I think she is a feminist, but not in the traditional term that she says.
Okay.
That's what it is.
So
like,
she put
she's not
feminist manhood. So
feminine masculinity.
Yeah.
So maybe she's not a feminist in the sense that we've been made to perceive feminism.
Yeah. So that's a better way.
And the idea that maybe black women can't be feminist, it might be an actual racist idea.
Yeah.
Depending on how we look at it. or let's say if that idea promotes the idea that feminism is a privilege, if I'm a woman of color, maybe I'm not allowed to have access to that privilege.
There's definitely a school of thought out there because the type of feminism that she's, even with the feminist manhood, which that was actually my favorite chapter.
Yeah, feminine masculinity.
That's chapter 7, and that was like out of all the chapters I liked it the most. And it's she speaks about the core of feminist masculinity is a commitment to gender equality and mutuality as crucial to interbeing and partnership in the creating and sustaining of life. So it's about partnership, it's about coming together. It's not about, I want men should be at the top of the pile, or we want women, because there's a tension there. But I think she's put the two words together, feminist manhood, to together. So it's an equality, which is what we
working
really want.
Together. She says, patriarchal masculinity insists that real men must prove their manhood by idolizing aloneness and disconnection. Feminist masculinity tells men that they become more real through the act of connecting with others through building community. And that's what she's all about, working in partnerships together. Let's work together to support each other and grow, rather than there's these masculine and feminine. It's all about collaboration and working together, which
these
I
are
like.
boxes. These are boxes that you put yourself in. That means you can't. And I think as well, the image of, I didn't make a note of it, but the image of like a man that takes on feminism or that is in touch with the feminist movement or is not opposed to it, that was then banded out there in the popular world as a weak man, as like not a real man, not a masculine man, because it's like, for being in touch. Even, I'm not gonna, these manosphere idiots, like I saw one, like my son, I take my son out, I push the pram, I do all sorts. And I see this guy talking and he's saying like, you'll never see me pushing a pram, that's a woman's job. You'll never see me taking my kid to the park. And I'm like, why are you putting yourself in that box? Because you're hurting yourself because you're not building that connection with your son or your child. And then 2, you're hurting your child because for the same reason, you're not building that connection. So it's like, you kind of put yourself in these tropes, but these are the messages that are put out, as in like, that's what it takes to be a man. And that's not actually the truth, because most men are outside in the real world. You have to be masculine in certain areas. You have to be, you should be a protector. That's my view. You should be there. You should feel safe. People should feel safe around you. And that's because they feel safe if you're not losing your temper after someone steps on your foot, you're going mad. Someone maybe barged past you in Sainsbury's, you're going mad. Like that's the regulated. But at the same time, you have to be masculine in a way, in a safe way. Then when you get home, you can be soft and playful and be childlike even. Do you know what I'm saying?
If you have access to it.
If you're able to do it, but you can also create that environment.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? I'm talking about, obviously if you're a child, you don't, but as men, we get an opportunity to create our own environment.
Correct.
So we can put ourselves in places where we feel safe and, so man, that's what I think about.
I think I agree with what you're saying, but when you come from a perspective of self-actualization, because it might well be that my references of being a man means that I identify with work. And I identify with being a provider.
She talks about that.
I identify with going to work, doing a great job of going to work, coming home and being a provider. And if I come home and then you expect me to hold space for my wife or hold space for my children, maybe that's not my role. My role is to make sure that every day I leave the house, come back, made enough money to keep a roof over our head, to keep everybody safe. Don't ask a lot more than that.
She says workaholism is the most common addiction in men, because it's usually rewarded and not taken as seriously as or as detrimental to their emotional well-being. But you're right. I think there's a perspective change, because obviously generations change and stuff like that. And I think, and she even speaks about her own dad, and he was sort of on that line of thinking. And look, it's not easy to go out and work and do all that kind of stuff and then come home and still have energy for your wife or for your family or whatnot. But just because it's not easy, there's ways that I think you can create an environment in a way that maybe you're not every night taking the kids out, but maybe you have that one day a week, one day every 2 weeks, one day a month, whatever it is. But can you find a way to connect?
Yeah, I think as well, I want to touch back on work, but you mentioned about the generations. I think this book was written in 2004. And I think the world now versus the world in 2004 is different.
In which way?
But I think it's similar as well.
Well, I think you know,
But some of the stuff she says still
some of
rings
it,
true today.
no, some of it's still relevant today. But what I think now, I think men now are more open to being a bit more emotional than 20 years ago, a bit more open to being vulnerable. And I think maybe that's partly to do with social media and online. We see men, you know, joking, and we see things online that allow men to express themselves more emotionally. Whereas 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. So I think, although a lot of what she says can still, I can still understand it in today, but I do feel that it's maybe some of it feels a bit dated.
I would disagree with you, Tyler, because when you think about how many of our young people out there look at Andrew Tate as a role model, how many of our young people out there, young boys, you know, perceive themselves as, you know, I have to win, or I have to use force, or I have to have this specific. It's real, right? If schools out there are really concerned that 15 years old, 14-year-olds are going to YouTube and finding the answer to their problems around masculinity through Andrew Tate and others, I think we're still in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I guess when I was growing up, I didn't see any of that side. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas now, I guess young people are seeing the Andrew Tates of the world.
They're looking for them.
And looking for them and seeking connection. Whereas I think how I grew up, I didn't see the world in the way she sees it 20 years ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things I did want to ask was, actually, let's go back onto work, because the chapter was work. What's love got to do with it? And
I like that chapter as well.
And she says, competition with other men in the workplace can make it all the more difficult for men to express feelings or to take time alone. The male who seeks solitude in the workplace, especially during downtimes, is seen as suspect. Yet, when men gather together at work, they rarely have meaningful conversations. They jeer, they grandstand, they joke, but they do not share feelings.
You know what? But is that a bad thing?
What? I mean,
no, I'm busy. I don't know, because is that a bad, because it's work. This is maybe my
work.
paycheck.
Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, it's work. So we're there. We've got a job to do.
But I think it's different in your work because...
No, but I've had jobs before. Like, I don't know. It's my personal opinion. I'm not saying I'm right. But when I read that, I thought, yeah, but then I thought, is that a bad thing though?
But I guess if we flip it on the other side, when women get together, will they share their emotions in work?
They won't. Like,
don't?
I think women are very sophisticated with regards to how they display their emotions, and if they come across, I mean, this is obviously a generalization, and I don't want it to be taken out of context. But women can share things that look or sound like they're actually sharing emotions, but just scanning each other. They could just be scanning each other, and the way men scan each other is differently. We scan each other through different tests.
I'm glad you put that disclaimer right there.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm glad you put, these are the views of that. No. But I hate what you're saying.
You know, but I wonder, why did that stood out for you? That statement.
That statement, because I think men don't, you know, get together, and I don't even think not necessarily in a work context. I think even with friends, when men get together, it's banter.
Oh yeah, together. Yeah.
It's never you know, I'm feeling stressed.
I don't know.
It's quite often banter and jokes and laughs. And I guess nowadays, I think with my group of friends, maybe we are a bit more vulnerable with each other. But I think 20 years ago, I can't imagine my dad getting with his friends and them talking about emotions. They'll be bantering. That's why I say I think it's changed a little bit, because although we don't go all the way in with our emotions, we might still say a few things now, here and there, whereas I definitely don't think 20 years ago that was the case.
No, I think generationally, I think you're right. So just quickly, we have to understand, like, men and women are different.
Correct.
So we operate and communicate in different ways. Yeah. And a lot of times men will, and I'm thinking from my own friendship group, and even whether it's a one-to-one or whether it's in group settings, there have been times where we've had like as a group had deep conversations, like and you know, if someone's going through something or what, there have been those times. But then also there's been them times when it's just nonsense and just banter and just whatever nonsense we're talking about at the time. But I don't know if that's a bad thing, if that's necessarily a bad thing, because when it becomes bad, I think, is if we're in a group, say it's the three of us, and we're chilling, we're having dinner or whatever, and then I say to you guys, look, man, this is going on, I'm struggling with this or whatnot, and I'll be vulnerable and open up. And then if you just shut me down and just start talking about football and or whatever it might be, then it's a problem. But if I feel like I don't want to share that moment, I just want to have a laugh and just mess around. Yeah. So there's a fine line of it. But I think definitely for work, for me, you might not even be that comfortable. I'm very lucky that I work with people that I consider as friends, so it's not a problem for me. But if I've worked in other environments as well, where I'm happy to keep it surface. Like I'm happy to, let's just talk about the weather. Like, it's fine.
Because at some point that can be perceived as safe. Because I think with regards to chatting about your emotions at work, do I trust that this is the right environment for me to talk about this? Do I trust that these other men are well equipped not to judge me wanting to open up? And then when we look at banter, when men get together and laugh, I think laughter is a good way of opening things up. We do have anger, which is an entry-level emotion that allows you to access many other things, but we also have laughter. And like Chris said, male and women can be different. So therapeutic language for men can look or sound substantially different through therapeutic language to women. It could be be that we're assisting each other through laughter, through making jokes, through making things slightly lighter. We can assist, but there's definitely different language for men. So I've been reading about this thing that they call the male archetype, and understanding what is the type of language that will allow a man to open up about things. So if I say to you, Tyler, let's just open up to me. What you mean?
What would you mean?
Pause. We just did it just then. We just did it because it's like, whoa. What do you mean? Open up. Do you know what I mean?
But if we develop trust through having several conversations, and those conversations are not perceived as an attack, and you perceive me as a man that perhaps can hold space for us to start talking about things that could be intimate or slightly intimate, then I've disarmed this idea that patriarchy creates, that it's not safe for me to share my emotions. You mentioned earlier, I might not feel that it's safe to share my emotions with my mom. I feel the same, because she's going to overthink it. I don't want her to be overthinking. She's going to call me 3 days later and say, well, the solution for that problem that you share could be, I said, Mom, I don't want you to be in this state for a whole 3 days, because I've managed it already. I shared it with you, but I've got my own tools and I've managed it already. But she's still going thinking my son is not safe. How can I protect my son?
Yes. But do you think that's exclusive to just because you're her son or because you're her child? So if you had a sister and your sister did exactly what you did, would your mum not do the same thing?
So when you think about women as agents of patriarchy, you'd see that women that think, like, it's not okay for my male son to be distressed with emotions. If I have a daughter and she's overwhelmed with her relationship or with how she gets on with her boyfriend, I kind of expect that, normal. But it's not okay for a woman to challenge the heart of my son.
Yeah. No, I get you loud.
You know, it's like it's not.
It's okay. More alarming. It's like whoa, he must be really going through it because But if it's a female, it's like he's a heartbreak and it's a different. I get that. That makes perfect sense.
So when we look at women as agents of this system that we're discussing, is the idea that if I'm a young girl and I did something bad and I got a beating from my son, I can expect to go to my room and my mom comes to my room and says to me, you should have listened to me. You should have stayed in line. You should have not. I think the example that she gives in the book is a young girl that wanted to play marbles.
It was her and her brother.
Yeah. Exactly. That she wanted to play marbles with her brother. I look at how I learned recently that one of our female members of staff, she's into gaming a lot. And my mind was like, a woman that's into gaming? Do you know what I mean? Because I associate that with boys. You know, boys who just sit in front of a screen and they can game for an hour. And how for me, a woman that's into gaming, like seriously into gaming,
a gamer.
It's like, she's a gamer.
Big up yourself.
Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? You know? And even another colleague at work yesterday, he came to me and he says, I want to give away my computer. I want to sell my computer. It's a gaming computer. And the first thing that came to mind was one of our male members of staff who's a gamer. You know, I didn't think about her until much later on. You know,
and that's a victim of the patriarchal society.
When you say that's a victim, what do you mean?
Not a victim, but that's the way that our unconscious mind has allowed us to think because of the patriarchal society.
Yeah. So imagine that as a woman, I was brought up in a system that I thought it was safe not to challenge men. It was safe to train our young girls not to challenge men. This is my role in keeping them safe. My role in keeping a man safe or a young man safe is to tell him that he's a man. You know, is to tell him that he's going to be strong. He's to tell him maybe that men don't cry. Or he's to tell him that you're going to grow up to be the man of the house. So I want you to be stronger. I want you to be better dealing with your emotions, because at some point you're going to have to protect me.
And that's where it starts, the pressing of emotions down, because you think, I need to be strong. As a child, in a child's mind, if I'm strong people don't cry. Some people don't feel.
My mum.
Some people. So I get it, man. There's someone that I know, and you know, growing up however you grew up, and he had to become the man of the house. People used to turn up. His dad went away, and then people used to turn up to the house to find his dad, and he used to have to fight. He's fighting men. He was fighting men at a young age. So then you become, so it's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And this is what I mean. Sorry, last thing. When it's like, it becomes like a prison, man. Because if you're sad, you can't tell no one you're sad, or if you're upset, you can't tell no one. So what you do, you just hold it. You just firm it.
I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. There's so much that we haven't touched on, but we're running out of time. Just quickly, what is the power of these pages? And Nelio, I'll start with you. What's the power in this book for you? If you could put this into 1 or 2 sentences, the power of these pages.
I think education, definitely education. It educates me towards the female experience. I was heavily impacted by the author describing that at some point as a young woman, she would find safety in the idea that I just want my dad to die and not to come home.
Yeah, I remember saying that.
That male presence is so threatening, and I'm so powerless against that male presence that I can just wish them to die. That's the only thing that could keep me safe. That's how powerless I am.
Yeah.
You know, so definitely education about the female experience. I think she educates us a lot about what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man? To be in touch with your emotions. But I was thinking, right, what's the power of these pages for me? So I was thinking, what is it that men can do? You know, before I came here today, so the first thing is that you can't heal what you can't feel. So if I can't feel empathy towards a version of masculinity that has stopped me from being in touch with my emotions, if I can't feel empathy towards a version of feminism that says, look, we love men, we love masculinity, but how it's been presented to us within a system is very, very, very challenging and unfair. If I can't feel that, I can't heal from it. You know, so I think that's one of the things that I get from the book. Something else would be, how do I create space for self-actualization? So I will have to immediately, I want to resist concepts and ideas that people are dumping on my version of being a man. I want to resist that. But can I pause that resistance that when people want to attack my masculinity through aggressive feminism, or if people want to associate my masculinity to toxic masculinity, and I want to be defensive of that, but can I pause that for a moment and create space for self-actualization? And where does that happen? It could happen through playing a game of cards. It could happen to, recently I started going to a sauna, and there's days just for men. And I found that men after the age of 60, they can sit in that sauna and talk about the stuff that affects them with a lot more comfortable than I could, for example. So I'm wondering, why does it take us so long
to get there?
And I think the other thing that I get from it is that it's okay for me to protect my male identity. You know, it's okay, because the issue is not masculinity.
And that's sort of sometimes banded as the problem. You know, you're dangerous, which again she speaks about in the book. I think she raises so many good points in the book that we haven't got the time to go through.
You're gonna go for your power quickly.
So for me, it's just a section from the book that I took out, and this resonated with me. And I think if you can really understand this, you'll do well. A Maasai, so you got the Maasai warriors, right? So a Maasai wise man, when asked by Terence Real to name the traits of a good warrior, replied, "I refuse to tell you what makes a good warrior, but I'll tell you what makes a great warrior." So if we replace that word warrior with man, when the moment calls for fearlessness, a good warrior is very ferocious. And when the moment calls for kindness, a good warrior is utterly tender. Now, what makes a great warrior is knowing which moment is which. And I think that is like,
Wisdom.
That is the wisdom, bro. That's like, yeah. And I think as a man, that is what it takes to be, because you have to know when, because this is when we get, I'll be quick, like this is when we get into that anger, the first one, fight. Use your brain, think about it. So that's for me, man. Just knowing which moment is which and then acting accordingly. That's me.
I guess my power was a lot being able to see the perspective of a female author, and also she mentioned she wanted to kill her father, or she had thoughts of killing her father, but that's because of the fear that she had. And I never thought that females could be that fearful of men, and some females are that fearful of men. And I think it allowed me to be a bit more empathetic and understanding that, you know, men can be perceived as scary to some women, and maybe it's part of my role and my responsibility as a man to try and, you know, lower that and, you know, make women feel more comfortable and not fearful. So especially the women in my life and that are around me. So yeah, that's kind of my power. Difficulty and star rating. We rate from 0 to 5, Nelio, how difficult we found this book to read. 0 being not difficult at all, 5 being extremely difficult. From 0 to 5, what?
We've got one rule. There's no 0.5.
No, there is. No,
before I give it a score,
yeah.
I wanted to kind of pick on what you said there. So you said that some females might be afraid of men.
Yeah.
I think most females are afraid of men, and I think it's also possible that most men are afraid of men, but they're afraid of men who are not in touch with their emotions. We could be men, and I could be afraid of my dad getting home and thinking that I'm not being masculine enough. You know, so that I could be afraid of men.
Yeah.
You know, and now I'm having to display some masculinity because I want to please my dad.
You have to shield it again.
You know, so I think this is not necessarily about men or women, but masculinity traits that can be very, very aggressive, unhelpful, damaging. So before I give it a score, I think because I do think what we see in a lot of young boys out there is fear of not pleasing their male figures, their male caregivers, their dads. So now I'm having to display aggressiveness, anger, because I want to please that male figure, because I don't want to disappoint him. And that lack of wanting to disappoint him can be fear. At one stage, my son's mom told me, "I think our son is afraid of you." So how can he be afraid of me? How can he be afraid of me? You know, because I thought I was friendly enough. I thought I was caring enough.
But the perspective.
But I'm having to understand that it's possible that a young boy, a young child, a teenager, a man can be afraid of another man. So going back to the score, I would give it a 10.
No. What, in terms of difficulty?
No, difficulty. So how difficult did you find it? 0 means
very
not
difficult
to read the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So more than a 5. Extremely difficult.
Extremely difficult, because I had to sit with every single, because it's not one of those books that I could just go through and blaze through, because every time she's presenting something, I'm having to sit with it. And I'm giving myself permission to sit with it.
We just got to check with the rule master. Is that allowed?
No, that's permissible.
Out of 5.
That's
you know, it's
permissible.
supposed to be out of 5. Is it allowed to be 10?
Yes.
Rule master.
He's a guest.
Okay, he's a guest.
So, 0 to 5.
Yeah, so 5 would be within the rules, within Chris's rules.
It's a 5 plus.
You can have 10. You can have 10. Don't worry, Nelio. You can have 10.
It's because I've been challenged by this book, I think. And I'm allowing myself to feeling to feel challenged by this.
Yeah.
book.
Okay.
You know what? That's yeah. I'll go quick. I think that's a good perspective. I've never normally when I do it, I just look at the writing style. So I've never.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective of how you answer that question.
Yeah.
I found it like a 4 because the writing style didn't really. I wasn't really a fan of her writing style.
Yeah.
Personally, but it wasn't difficult in the way that it wasn't difficult read, but the way she wrote the book was quite difficult. So it was quite hard for me to finish this book actually. So yeah, 4.
Yeah. Likewise, I didn't enjoy the writing style. It was difficult to read.
What about it? What was it about it?
I don't know. It just felt like it didn't flow smoothly when I was reading it. I had to reread pages a lot. It took me really long to read, despite being a short book. And I gave it a 3.5. So yeah, quite.
It's this point business.
So,
But that's why I think the book was really, really provocative. And we could think it's the reading style, or we could also think it's the ideas that are being presented to us.
yes, but I think the ideas could have been presented in a easier reading style.
Okay.
I think that's possible. But yeah, we're running out of time, Nelio. So star rating, how good is this book from 0 to 5? 0, again, not good, terrible. 5, the best book ever.
I'll give it a 5+ again because the title sticks with me. The title says "The Will to Change," so I don't have to change. I don't want to change, but I can identify the will to change. And change here would be increase my perception, my understanding of these ideas. Can I give myself permission to be open to some of these ideas? I don't have to adopt them. I don't have to take them on. I don't have to agree with them. But is there a will to change?
Yeah. Okay. And you for your star rating?
You know, I'm not. Where am I on this?
The thing is, I put my number down here. You do your numbers live.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I do.
So you've changed from the conversation.
Yeah, I have. But I'm trying to think because I'm just thinking, would I recommend this book? I would. It's a book people need to read. Yes, they should read it, both men and women, because I think for women to understand what men go through, and for men to understand what men go through as well. You know what? For that reason, I'll give it a 4. I was originally going to give it a 3, but I think it can't, because it's an interesting topic. It's a shame that she's passed now, because it would be good to have like a revised version in today's society. Just, I mean, if it's 20 years old, but yeah, 4.
Okay. I didn't enjoy the read. It took me so long. I enjoyed parts of it, and I want to put my score up because of this conversation, because I think it's a really important conversation and really eye-opening. But as a book, I didn't enjoy it. So I gave it a 2.5 as a book. As a conversation, 5+, Nelio. But as a book, yeah, 2.5.
Are you glad you read it?
I am glad I read it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I read it because it opened my mind. I mean, I never regret reading anything, even if I give it a 2.5. But I would recommend it. But I found the read quite difficult and challenging, despite being a short book. But that's all we've got time for. Next episode, we will be reviewing "Surrounded by Idiots" by Thomas Erickson. And yeah, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Thank you, Nelio, for coming on and recommending this book.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's been a pleasure having you. But this is The Power of Pages.
And we review books.